Welcome back to Boilers and Beyond. It's another week, and we're another week closer to the kickoff of Purdue football. Less than 4 weeks remain between us and some action at Ross-Ade Stadium, and now there is a little bit of action over in the vicinity with fall camp underway. It kicked off last Friday with an open practice at Ross-Ade Stadium for the public to see. All is well. It is great to finally be talking and previewing some football. Today, we're going to take a look back at the offseason, some of the bigger storylines that surrounded Purdue football before we dive into a few of the bigger topics that are going to be talked about at fall camp this year, some of the bigger battles to watch, all of that provided by our audience. As always, if you give us a follow on Twitter at BoilersBeyond, you are always more than welcome to participate in our Q&A sessions. Always good stuff that you guys send in for me. I'm really excited about some of the questions I'll get to answer here later on in the show. Purdue's coming in off a 2-4 season, and it was a bizarre 2-4 season. Obviously, with COVID, the season was cut in half. Kevin Warren's decision to cancel the season early on limited how many games could be played. Purdue had 2 games canceled because of COVID. The Wisconsin game was canceled due to outbreaks in the Badger program. The Purdue-Indiana game, the Old Oaken Bucket, was not played for the first time in nearly a century last year. Both teams were dealing with COVID, though Purdue had a more serious outbreak than the Hoosiers did. And it left a sour taste in the mouths of Purdue fans, ending the year on a 4-game losing streak for the first time in a while. That's going to be the first time since the 2016 season when Purdue ended on a 6-game losing streak, I believe, maybe a 7-game. The first time in a while that Purdue ended on such a bad losing streak. And Jeff Brohm didn't waste any time making some changes around the program. Bob Diaco was fired right away. He had another year left on his contract. That didn't matter. The defense had taken a turn for the worse last year. And, you know, I probably should have seen it coming. Certainly a controversial guy in Bob Diaco. Lots of positives to like about him and what he's done in his career. Lots of negatives as well. He has not always been the most well thought of coach, and that showed last year very quick. The defense was all right in the first 2 games. Thought they did a nice job against Iowa late in holding off the Hawkeyes on the final drive, and against Illinois, we probably should have seen some signs of trouble to come when Illinois' third-string quarterback and just with a roster decimated by COVID issues, they mounted a late comeback to really make Purdue sweat in that one before the defense really just imploded in games against Rutgers and Nebraska when they simply couldn't get off the field and caused Purdue to lose games that they very easily could have, and in the case of the Rutgers game, certainly should have won. The bend, don't break philosophy just didn't work. And Jeff Brohm replacing him quickly. And it was interesting that Anthony Poindexter, not surprisingly, left as well. He went to Penn State to be a co-defensive coordinator where, you know, that's something that is probably similar to his role at Purdue, where he's not calling the shots on defense. It's a nice title for the HR role, and certainly gives him a nice pay increase. He did a nice job at Purdue, recruited the defensive side of the ball very well. And soon after that as well, it was interesting to see Purdue move on from Aaron Hodges, who was the director of player personnel, really a guy who made a name for himself due to his activity on Twitter. And that wasn't always the most popular thing among the fan base. That certainly didn't always rub everyone the right way. It certainly got people very on board with him as well. But after a recruiting class that probably wasn't as highly rated as Jeff Brohm would have liked, he elected to move on, and the replacement was swift. Replaced Hodges internally with Nate Dennison, who is now in that role, not quite as active on Twitter as Hodges was. Hodges ended up at Texas Tech briefly, has since moved on from that program as well, and is in a role at Louisville now. And then, with replacing Diaco and Poindexter, the entire defensive staff was overhauled. We'll talk about it a little bit more in next week's defensive preview, where we break down the defensive side of the ball for Purdue. But Brad Lambert, the main man, coming from Marshall, former head coach at Charlotte as well. He'll be the play caller on defense. Up front, Mark Hagan, a very familiar guy around the program, spent nearly a decade in West Lafayette under Joe Tiller and Danny Hope. He comes from Texas. Purdue was able to hire him away after Texas elected to move on from Tom Herman, and that whole staff went. Lambert will coach the linebackers as well as being the defensive coordinator. And then Ron English, another former head coach. He was at Eastern Michigan for a bit. Has some significant experience, though, as a position coach at Florida with the defensive backs, and was a defensive coordinator up in Ann Arbor for the Wolverines under Lloyd Carr in the mid-2000s. James Adams from Navy got brought in to help coach the corners. And on the offensive side of the ball, we did see Purdue make one slight move. They brought in Neil Calloway to be an offensive line coach alongside Dale Williams. They took away the tight end coach position because you can only have so many on-field coaches. Purdue really wanted to bolster that offensive line. They've done that with their investment of 2 coaches to the offensive line. We'll see here how that pays off. If you're Purdue, you really hope so. That offensive line hasn't always been the strength of your team. Outside of coaching, though, the other part of the offseason, a massive transfer portal offseason. We saw the NCAA approve the one-time transfer rule, and before that rule even was approved, the portal was it was busy as can be. And we saw, even before the end of the season, Purdue lost a somewhat significant player in receiver Ahmad Anderson. He left Purdue, ended up landing at Temple. I think he's going to be really good there. I liked Anderson, more of a possession receiver than a speed demon out there, but he can be rock solid for Temple over in the AAC. And, then Purdue kind of got on a roll. They were able to land Tyler Witt, offensive lineman, 5th year from Western Kentucky. He projects to start. O.C. Brothers from Auburn is going to be big time. Joseph Anderson, South Carolina, another guy who is going to come in and play and be productive. Jamari Brown from Kentucky, just another guy in the SEC pipeline for Purdue this offseason. Purdue really benefited from this, and that transfer portal is going to be something you see them use quite a bit. It's going to be a great resource for a team like Purdue, who can go get some of that better talent from the group of 5 schools up to that Power 5 level. That's going to be something Purdue can really utilize to their advantage. They did lose a couple significant guys. Tyreek Murphy didn't play last year. He had an unfortunate incident where he was cited by West Lafayette Police the night before Purdue's season opener against Iowa. He transferred out. Former 4-star running back is headed to Rhode Island. And Malik Carr in a clear tampering case by Michigan State. Not that I really think that's a huge issue. I think that's going to happen all the time to the point where it's going to be the new normal, and you're going to have to recruit against that with your current active players. But he left, went back to his home state to play for the Spartans. He thought he had a better shot of playing basketball there. It was interesting that he is listed on their roster as a tight end for football. He has made it very clear that he does not wish to be considered a tight end. And then another former recruit that drew a lot of excitement, Stephen Faucheux, didn't work out for him at Purdue. Just didn't see a good path to playing time, and he transferred to Marshall. Probably a good fit where he will be able to probably get on the field a little bit more at that group of 5 level in the AAC, or their Conference USA, excuse me, and probably play at a pretty high level there. I think that's probably a good move for him. But as I said, the transfer portal's big. It's going to continue to be a big part of Purdue. Recruiting is also there. They brought in a class that wasn't as widely praised as some of Jeff Brohm's other classes at Purdue. The clear headliner, Yanni Karlaftis. He is obviously the brother of George Karlaftis and really figures to be a contender for early playing time. I think we will see him really pretty early. I would be very surprised if we don't see him on the field this year. Besides him, I don't know how many of these guys we'll see play early on. Jack Ansel, I guess, is technically a member of that recruiting class as well. The 22-year-old, something like that, Australian punter. Some of the Purdue gets 2 good receivers coming in, but with how deep that room is, it'll be difficult. Some good offensive line prospects, but again, it's a deep. It's a tough climb to get to the offensive line at the Big Ten level right away. I think those guys will be sitting on the second and third units for the most part early on, and we'll see them maybe a little bit towards the end of the year, but mostly in the years to come. So that's the offseason. I know we've gone into a lot more detail throughout the offseason here on the show, but now that we're into camp, it's all about projecting for this season. And there are certainly plenty of takes to be had, plenty of position battles to watch. I tweeted out this morning, asked for some input from you all. And, of course, one of the questions coming in from Jason, asking about the quarterback situation. And that is the million-dollar question. If you're Purdue, it's Jeff Brohm's offense. It is going to be a passing attack. Purdue led the Big Ten in passing yards per game last year. That is probably never going to change under Jeff Brohm. They're always going to be up towards the top. He loves to throw the ball around. Purdue has a lot of receivers to get the ball to. The question's going to be, who's throwing it to him? Another year of Jack Plummer and Aiden O'Connell battling it out. Austin Burton, the former UCLA transfer, and Michael Alamo, the redshirt freshman, former 4-star recruit, are also in that quarterback room. I think it's down to Plummer and O'Connell. I'd be very, very surprised if we saw either Burton or Alamo early on this year. Certainly injuries could happen, and Jeff Brohm alluded to that in an interview he did after the first spring practice of the year, mentioned that his quarterback has been hurt in all 4 seasons, something both rare, but, something that if you're a Purdue fan, you have to hope changes this year. You would love to have some stability there, at least from an injury perspective. If changes are being made, you'd rather it be because someone could do a better job than because someone's hurt. I'm not hearing much. This is going to be something where Jeff Brohm has said he'll name an internal starter. I don't expect that we will find out a starting quarterback until the Boilers take the field on offense against Oregon State. Maybe, just maybe, on the depth charts provided to the media, Jeff Brohm will name a starting quarterback before the game a couple hours before kickoff. I doubt it. I think it's going to be Aiden O'Connell or Jack Plummer on the list. I don't necessarily have a huge opinion in that. I think Plummer's a little bit more dynamic, but, I see the benefit of O'Connell as well. I'll probably look more into this for the offensive preview here in 2 weeks and have a little bit more of an opinion there. But, for right now, I think it's a good spot to be in. I don't mind the quarterback competition, and ultimately I do expect it to be either number 16 or number 13 come September 4th against the Beavers. Sticking in, the depth chart order, Mackie Maniacs asking about the running back room. Xander Horvath, will he be the leader again this year? Have the running backs impressed? Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get to the open practice Friday night. I was busy moving into a new apartment where I'm recording this episode now. Yes, Xander Horvath is probably going to be the leader in the backfield again. He really was pretty solid last year all around. I think some of the games where he struggled a little bit, you have to kind of look at the play calling and when he's getting the ball when everyone knows Purdue's going to run the ball, but they're throwing it at other times. Some games last year, Purdue got behind early. In the Nebraska game's a clear example, and the Minnesota game was just a track meet where throwing the ball was Purdue's only option on offense. So, yes, I think Horvath will be the leader. I expect a bounce-back year from King Doru, who just couldn't get healthy with that hamstring problem last year. I expect him to be better, but, it's a thin room. The only other scholarship running back is true freshman Jaquez Cross. I do think he will be productive at Purdue. He's a little bit faster than both Horvath and Doru, and that's something Purdue could use. A little bit of a burst of speed in that backfield would be a welcome sight, but as a true freshman, that's a pretty big jump from high school to college, just in terms of the hits you take and the size of the guys you're going against. I would say I expect Horvath to get about 60% of the carries in the backfield, another 25 to 30% to Doru, and then maybe Cross can get out there. Maybe we'll see Jackson Anthrop, the sixth-year senior wide receiver. There's been talk of him getting some snaps in the backfield. I wouldn't be surprised, especially in pass-catching downs. He could do a really good job back there as well. He's been rock solid throughout his career at Purdue. And, who knows? Maybe Marcellus Moore, the speedster, could do something back there. Maybe TJ Sheffield, the slot receiver and kickoff returner. There's a lot of other guys Purdue could plug in back there. But in terms of true running backs, it is a thin room. Brian asks about what I think the most underrated part of this team is right now. And that's a pretty good question. I think, to some degree, without Rondale Moore and with him not having a great year last year, I think some attention has been taken off of Purdue's wide receivers, and unfairly so. David Bell certainly gets a lot of recognition. He is spectacular. He's a true All-American candidate. Milton Wright had a good year last year, and I think he'll build on that. But there's just so much depth to that wide receiver room. You have TJ Sheffield, who will step right into the slot where Rondale Moore was. I think he'll be productive. Also in the slot, Jackson Anthrop is as reliable of an option as you can get, even if he's not a massive big play threat. You know he's a guy who's going to catch the ball. He's going to move the chains for you. He's a reliable option to have out there. Mershawn Rice oozes with potential. I think he could be really good for Purdue. Abdur-Rahman Yassin, another guy who we didn't get to see much of last year. Very highly regarded prospect coming out of high school. Deion Burks and Preston Terrell, a couple of true freshmen who both come in pretty well regarded, both 3-star recruits on the upper side of that 3-star rating. I know I'm certainly forgetting someone in there just because of how deep that wide receiver room is. I think Purdue's in really good shape there. And on the other side of the ball, I don't think people talk about Purdue's safeties much because the secondary wasn't all that strong last year. Cam Allen has been really good and in 2 years has established himself as a very established starter at safety. And alongside him, Marvin Grant has all the potential in the world. He is a big play threat. He will hit you hard. Certainly a fearless safety. Cam Allen fits that bill as well. They are both guys who aren't afraid to punish you for going over the middle. And, you have more depth to that position this year as well. I really liked the addition of Christopher Jefferson. He is a transfer safety from Findlay University, D2 school over in Ohio. He'll be a nice depth piece. He was a D2 All-American. I don't know that I think he'll start right away, but he could certainly be a good depth piece. And then the redshirt freshman Sanusi Kane is another guy who is really athletic. I think he could be really valuable to that secondary, that safety position, and that gives you a pretty nice 2 deep at the safety spot there that you can feel pretty good about, especially when outside of Corey Trice, there's not a lot of proven stability at the corner spot. Let's see. We'll go with Josh's question next. Ask, what Purdue's goal and motivation for this season should be. What's going to get them fired up every week? You know what? When I was looking through the magazines for last week's magazine preview episode, that quote from an opposing coach in the Athlon magazine saying that they weren't sure about Purdue's toughness, that right there is what gets you fired up for this season. If you're the Purdue team, you got to go out and prove them wrong. You already have lost quite a bit of momentum from Jeff Brohm's first 2 years. Year one, you have a big-time bowl win after a shocking 6-6 season. Year two, you take down 3 top 25 teams, including the Ohio State win, and you get to another bowl, albeit the bowl game didn't go all that well. Momentum's been, some wins been lost out of the sails now. You have to get some momentum back. That quote about not being tough is your driving force, but ultimately you want to get people to respect Purdue again. This is a great opportunity to do it. This is a massive year. That's really where, if you're this team, that's probably what you should be most excited about and really use for motivation. You're predicted 6th in the Big Ten West in the preseason. The team that's picked below you just fired their coach, and you beat them last year. So you're not getting tons of respect in the preseason. I'd have all that stuff pinned up on the bulletin boards if I was Jeff Brohm. And speaking of Jeff Brohm, our final question comes from Sam, a longtime listener of the show. Asks what record this season would put Brohm on the hot seat. And he clarifies he's optimistic, but wants to hear my thoughts. This is such a tough question. because certainly, in normal thoughts, a third straight season of missing a bowl would probably be enough to do that and make some fans wonder about Jeff Brohm's job stability. But with his contract and a massive buyout of 8 figures here, both after this year and after next year, Jeff Brohm's not going anywhere. I think, right now the Vegas over-under win total is 5 wins for this team. If he goes 5-7, you enter a spot that's really difficult because you are, quite frankly, satisfying the expectations that the odds makers have for you, but you are not satisfying the expectations of the fans, and getting excited for next season will be pretty tough for a lot of people. I think, obviously a 2 or 3 win season this year would be a disaster, and we'd really start to hear a lot of criticism, but ultimately, unless the big shots of the John Purdue club are really looking to move on from Jeff Brohm, he's safe through this year. And then a real question would be, going into next year, what does that job stability look like? I would have to think he's probably good to go into the 2023 season, no matter what happens. But I've been wrong before. I thought Bob Diaco was going to be a good hire, so clearly I'm not always right about these things. That's all I've got for you today. Thank you to all of you who tweeted in some questions. Feel free, get started now. Tweet me some questions about the defense. We will be getting to that next week, so tweet them at Boilers Beyond. A full preview of Brad Lambert's new 4-3 style defense. What can George Karlaftis do in what is likely his last year in the gold and black before he goes to the NFL? We'll dive into all of that next week. Until next time, let me know what you want to hear about the defense, and we'll talk next week. Stay safe, and we are less than a month away from football. Enjoy it.